Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. My name's Sarah Lancaster. I'm the industry programmer for this year's festival. And thank you very much for joining us for our second of 3 Telefilm Canada Talent to Watch sessions. We're really thrilled to be working with Telefilm on these sessions this year. And to tell you a little bit more about the program and to introduce our wonderful speakers today, I'd like to introduce you to Telefilm Canada's Director of National and International Business Development, Sheila Delaveron.
Welcome, everybody. How is everybody this morning? This is day 5 of the festival. I don't know about you guys, but it's been a marathon, but it's also been extremely illuminating. Another memorable TIFF, so thank you, TIFF, for everything that you offer to us. As my colleague just said from TIFF, we're really thrilled to see you here. This is the second session of Talent to Watch. It's very moving, very touching for me and my team, who are with me, Florence and Brigitte and Marie-Claude, to see you all here, to see you all gathered for this important session. This year we've taken rather bold and hopefully innovative steps to support Canadian talent and to support the Canadian films at TIFF in new ways, and to to make sure that that sparkle of Canadian talent is out there with the media, with the journalists, and with the Canadian public who are going to go and see the films of these wonderful filmmakers. So we hope that you've enjoyed these sessions. Today is the second one, as I said. The first one we launched last Friday with Adam McGoyan. We were very pleased with that, and the new teams, the new feature film teams at TIFF. And we have another session on Wednesday, which I hope you all will come out for again. I'm really happy to see so many of you here today. We had a full room on Friday, and it's great that you all made the effort and to hear these filmmakers today. So today's session is called Far Away, So Close, New Canadian Stories. And so before we start talking, I'd like us all to take just a little peek, a little look at some of what the filmmakers are putting forth at TIFF this year.
Do you know why this comes to mind?
No?
His father died in Auschwitz.
In
I think another round of applause would be in order. Bravo, bravo, bravo. It's so exciting to see those clips. Depuis les 10 dernières années, c'est vrai que le cinéma canadien explore de plus en plus les frontières au-delà du Canada et aussi vraiment les problèmes, disons, mondiaux, universaux que nous partageons avec le monde. So today, I'm very, very honored to have with us an Oscar-nominated guest, a truly international talent and filmmaker who has an international outlook, whose films are often set in Canada and in India. The final installment in her very well-known trilogy of Fire, Earth, and Water garnered Academy attention and recognition. She's been called a transnational filmmaker, but she's also a wonderful, warm, and creative person. We're very, very happy and fortunate to have in the Canadian filmmaking community. I'm really very, very honored to welcome today Deepa Mehta, who also, by the way, just last week was also announced a new a tribute that will be given to you by the Canadian Centre for Diversity. So we're very, very honored to have you with us here today, Deepa. Thank you for taking the time.
Hi, everybody. When I was asked by Telefilm to come and say something about this amazing way of thinking and meeting these incredible new filmmakers, I said, holy shit, I don't want to. What do you say to people who are, or say about people who are brilliant, who have done such great work? And what do you say about Telefilm, who in the last 6 months and a year has really changed the way we look at cinema here? They have decided to become supportive of the other, being a part of the other. I mean, I've been a Paki, I've been a visible minority, I've been a diverse person. It's really nice just to be a Canadian who can tell the story that she or he wants. And I thank you all for that. That's amazing. Yeah. So I was saying earlier that I sort of know what I want to talk about, and I sort of am confused about what it means about far away, close, Canadian stories, non-Canadian stories. And a quote came to mind, and the quote, strangely enough, is by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who was the first Prime Minister of India when India gained its independence from England. And this is a very famous speech of his, which he gave at the stroke of midnight. And, you know, it talks about at the stroke of midnight hour, while the world sleeps, India will regain its freedom. But the paragraph that actually I thought is very relevant to us today is one that says that, he says, I wish for India to create a mansion of free India where all her children can dwell in peace and in harmony and be able to talk with each other. And I think that's what's very important today, is not only how people perceive us, but how we perceive each other. 2 days ago, I saw a film that made me radically rethink the way I look at Canadian films, rethink the way I think we are perceived or should be perceived, our relevance, lack of it, our stories, colored stories versus white stories or Franco stories. It was a film by Sarah Polley called Take This Waltz. I loved it. I walked out of it and I thought, my God, Sarah's done something that's amazing. She has opened for me a window into the world of how Canadians think who might be in their late 20s and 30s. And it was such a revelation. And I thought that if all of us can do the same, make films that can start communication and open a window into how the other things, we will have a solid film industry. I want us to be like perhaps yes, like Buñuel, when he said that when you make something particular, that's the very minute you start making something that's universal. I don't want to think about how we are perceived, how we are not. I just want us to have the freedom to make the kind of films that we want to make, that are not a compromise because of where we come from or what language we speak or what actors we have accessibility to, but just because we really desire to. And I want to really thank Telefilm for actually making that possible. Have a great time, but don't get caught into what's Canadian, what's not. Make a good film, that's all. Thank you.
I promise you we're going to start the conversation soon. Je vous promets, on y arrive. Si l'animateur d'aujourd'hui, il est pleinement new-yorkais dans l'âme, il est originaire du Canada. Lawrence Kardish has led a distinguished career. We're very honored to have him here today as the moderator of the session. He's, as you probably know, he's organized hundreds of film exhibitions at the prestigious MoMA in New York City. We are also very thrilled to have him as a long-standing partner of the Canadian Front, which is a showcase of Canadian films that we show in New York every year in the month of March. And Lawrence, I know, is also a great lover of Canadian film and also somebody with profound knowledge of Canadian film. Just a month ago, he was amongst other tastemakers and decision makers in the New York community who had access to the new Canadian films premiering at TIFF. We showed, Telefilm took 12 of the teams to New York to show the clips that you saw today and other clips to New York decision makers in terms of buyers and programmers, and so that was very successful. And Lawrence was very much a part of that as well. So we thank him for being here today. And I'm finished. That's it. So I hope you enjoy the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheila. Thank you. Thank you, Sheila. And also just interesting, in Sarah Polley's film, during the course of the film, there's an anniversary being celebrated, and it was interesting that the two of the main characters, Seth Rogen and Michelle Williams, go to a theater here in Toronto called the Royal to see Mon Oncle Antoine, which is one of the great Canadian films. So there was a real consistency in that film, but it just reminded me because it is somewhat of a melancholic film, Mon Oncle Antoine, and looking at the clips today, I'm thinking that there is a sense of kind of, I don't know, loss or sadness about most of them. The Holocaust in your film, Ingrid, suicide in your film, Philip, something, the main character seems to be somewhat disappointed in life in your film, and the brother, who is not the star, also seems to be a bit disaffected. I may be reading into this. Do you want to talk a bit about a kind of sadness or melancholy in new Canadian cinema? Or is this too heavy already? Okay.
That's a trick question. I think it's probably the clips that I saw humor, basically, in all. Not my clip because it's a dramatic. Although there is some humor in the way the speech of the young girl it evolves, but I see humor in the other clips, and I see that either drama or serious issues can be tackled with humor, because in life, dramatic things often occur with also humor simultaneously. And for me, it's important that when I make a film, that there's light, luminosité, and in all of my films, I've tried to make the drama and the humor occur simultaneously. So I'm not a sad person, and I think it's a way of looking at the films, or a way of looking at the topics, the topics.
Anyone else want to say anything about this before we?
I think that for me, I mean, I'm coming really from the English-Canadian filmmaker's point of view. I've been here a bunch of times. You know, let's just be really blunt about being an English-Canadian filmmaker. You are always on the outside, looking in. Even here, the excitement that people have is it begins with the famous parades of Hollywood movie stars that come and go through Toronto. My movie, there's touches of that being outside looking in, like that brother who's not quite, no one gives a shit about him, because he's not on a big show or whatever. And I think that
He's Canadian.
yeah, but there's an obsession with that, I think, in English Canada, and I think even when it comes to what movies we want to make and finance and get behind, we want our movies to work. We want people to see our movies. We're obsessed with that in English Canada. These guys who make really much better films than the English Canadians, they don't have this problem, and I'm
I
jealous.
like the way you point at me when you say these things.
But I mean, this is like I look at his clip. I'm emotional because it's morning, and we had our screening last night. But I want to cry when I watch your
Okay.
film, and I don't know who this girl is. She's not famous, and the kids in the class aren't famous, and there's no one famous in that scene. And maybe they're famous in Quebec. I really doubt it. But I have profound jealousy for a filmmaker who can say, "Damn all that stuff. I'm going to tell an honest story about something that matters to me and to my people." We can't do that in English Canada very well.
Do you want to respond, Ingrid, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I was just going to say at the core of my work, which is quite personal, I work with my family. My first film was with my son. My second film was with my daughter. My third was with my daughter and myself. At the heart of them, I think, is a struggle that starts with my parents coming to Canada from Czechoslovakia in 1968, and they had to leave everything they knew, everything familiar behind. Their family, their jobs, their livelihood, a familiar language, and start from scratch. And making every film kind of feels that way. I was out last night and I had this profound sense of community, which is something amazing that this film festival does, is it brings us all together. The last time I saw you was a few years ago, and Carl last year, and I'm meeting you for the first time, but it kind of brings us all together. And that sense of community, I think, is something that I'm always seeking and searching, and it's what actually drew me to acting, because I'm an only child. I came here with my parents. We were very displaced, building a community from the ground up, and being a part of movies feels like a family, whether you're in front of the camera or behind, but there's this intimacy and this intensity and this kind of heightened life that happens. And I think it's wanting that experience that drives my filmmaking. And sometimes that is sad and it's hard and you suffer,
Yes.
but it's also very joyous.
In terms of what I'm trying to say in the film I made, it's not so much sadness. Obviously, there's a lot of hope. And I think that I think sadness is going out, personally. The past 15 years, there's been filmmakers kind of bombarding us with nihilistic ways of seeing life. I'm thinking of Bruno Dumont and like these films where there was like acts of violence at the end that said that life could only have negative outcomes. And I think in general, people want a different message. They don't want sadness. In my film is a narrative sadness. It's necessary for the catharsis at the end, if you see the film. But I think there is a current of people wanting to add hope to life, add kind of positive endings. Because I think in filmmaking today, or at least in the past 15 years, there's been very negative endings. Art films have been seen like just sad films. I don't think art films have to be sad films. Art films can be films that, because that's the anti-cliche of a Hollywood film, When you go to a video store, you want to pick up something and have a mix of messages.
Right. I jumped right in with that question about melancholy, but I do want to say that I think this is a terrific panel at the museum in New York. We've shown 3 of the filmmakers very, very happily, and their works were very well received, including Ingrid's first film, Only, which is like a 4-character film shot in Northern Ontario on a minuscule budget, but it really captures the feeling of kind of the childhood and boredom and meeting new friends. And Congo-Rama, Philippe's film, got one of the most spectacular reviews ever in the New York Times by Tony Scott, and it's a terrific film. And Carl's film, A Natural and Accidental, showed me at least a part of Vancouver I had never seen before and dealt with an issue that really happened about the serial killers of Aboriginal women in a very powerful film. I tried to see Ivan's film twice. First on a DVD, and my DVD player wouldn't work, and then I went to the screening yesterday, and the projector broke down, but I'm determined to see it. The 30 seconds look very, very compelling. But I wanted to ask you, since this is all about new narratives, are there new narratives? What is new about the films that are being made now in Canada from your point of view? I know that Canada is much more of a multicultural nation, at least from when I was growing up, and I left in '66. But is that all that new? Does someone want to talk about that? I know that two of the films deal with immigrants to Montreal. Is that correct? Your film, Ivan, and your film, the Lebanese community in Montreal, which is not basically seen before in Canadian cinema? I don't know.
Perhaps. Yeah, I think so. It's not necessarily, the point of the film was not necessarily to show the Lebanese community per se, but a community that's not white and Québécois, because I grew up second generation Serbian, Montenegrin, and I wanted to show a different side of Montreal, like very prevalent side of Montreal itself. And I wanted to make a film with kind of an immigrant community that wasn't about immigration. That was very important for me. A classic narrative. There's nothing new about the story. It's a coming-of-age story. There's a handicapped person in the film, but narratively speaking, you've heard about this story before. But I think it was very important to have characters that were not Québécois, not French-speaking originally, to display a story that's very simple and kind of, I think, it's a quiet statement in itself. I think in Canada, like I think of The Deer Hunter, like a very old film in the States, kind of there's a Russian Orthodox kind of community, but it's not the point of the film. But there's an underlying theme about immigration that has nothing to do with the main storyline. And I think I want to create a film like that in Quebec, because I think that point of view is lacking. That was not the first reason, but I think an underlying reason.
Jacob Tierney, maybe 8 months ago, said that in Quebec, we don't make films about Anglophones or including Anglophones and including immigrants. And there was an uproar. And I think but I think he was right. I went on radio that same day. When I read that in the paper, I said, oh, there's going to be all kind of radio shows this at noon talking about that. And there were, and I went on the radio show and said, he's right. A cat is a cat. And we're not, in our films, we seldom show other communities. And I'm not saying that Telefilm should force us to do so. It's up to the artist to write whatever he wants to write about. But we have to be honest with us. These films are very rare. Myself, I came to cinema by accident, really, in 1992. I participated in a contest at Radio-Canada called The Race Around the World, and I was propelled around the world alone with a camera for 6 months. I had to do 20 short movies. So I learned making cinema by meeting other people, meeting the other. And that's why I agree with what Deepa said earlier. It's about meeting people. And so if I'm going to spend 3 years of my life talking about something, I want to learn something myself. I want to meet someone else. The Belgian guy in Kangorama was about that. The Algerian, which is the main character in Monsieur Lazare, I went to Algeria. I researched a little bit the character. And my anxiety about that is that do I have the right to talk about a community or a person that I don't have an intimate, point of entry into this story? I have to learn about him, about them. And for me, making films, whether it's Canadian or Quebec film, and I've been coming here for 11 years, and every year we have that topic, what is a Canadian film? I don't know, I don't care. And I would answer the same thing for Quebec films, really. For me, it's about meeting the other.
Great, yeah.
Just the question you had about narrative. Growing up in the industry, I've grown in a very sort of traditional way of making films or television shows, but my work as a director, writer, producer has been very exploratory. I think I've worked with a documentary filmmaker, Peter Metler, for 20 years, and he's a very process-driven artist. And my narratives are completely dictated by my resources. So for my first film, I wanted to make a film with my son, who was 12 years old before he turned 13. And when I was 12 years old, I lived in a motel that my father managed near Parry Sound. So I went to the motel, and they allowed us to shoot there, and I had $5,000. So my money, knowing I wanted to make a film with my son, a location, the narrative basically rippled out from that, from the very limited resources, similar to Modra, similar to I am a good person, I'm a bad person. The story is sort of, the rack is my resources, and then the narrative comes out of there, becomes the hangers. And it's a really, really interesting way to work, but it's completely on the fringe and sort of outside the system, because I don't have a budget when I start. I don't have a schedule when I start. I have a script, but the script is by no means something I want to execute. The script is simply something I want to start from, and it's the minimum that the film will be. And in most cases, the actors that I worked with on this film never read the script. I basically told them vaguely what I wanted to do. I Skype auditioned people from England and Berlin and Paris, and it was, do you want to be a part of the ride? And the narrative really was born out of moments that were happening in the moment, you know?
Carl, do you want to talk also about new narratives? Since I think you're probably the most prolific of filmmakers on this panel. I mean, I think it's rather astonishing the number of films that you've made.
Well, I'm a bit like Ingrid, you know. I've made bigger movies, but I find it started for me when I did a film called Normal, which played here a few years ago. And I had this wonderful relationship with Carrie Ann Moss, which grew out of making the movie. And I thought to myself, I know her so well now, if only I could go back and now make the film with her. You know, you spend so much time chasing people so that you can get all of the machine to work, so that the trucks will line up and the money will be there and the film stock can roll and all that stuff. And no time with the people who are at the center, at the core of the filmmaking experience. So I started a new plan. I won a prize for that movie, and I thought, I'm going to take this prize money, cancel, you know, the Mexican vacation, and invite my friends to collaborate on an unscripted piece of work, and we'll spend many months together talking, doing this, just sitting around. What are we going to shoot? And then we have a little outline, but we never write it. We don't write it. And then we'll improvise. And I did it as a kind of a test and a joke, and I don't know, will this work? The film came here in 2008, maybe, Mothers and Daughters. It was a huge success. It won all these audience prizes at festivals. It traveled around. People would come up to me. They didn't care if it was not a movie star in the movie. They just wanted to talk about their mother, or wanted to go and run and call their mother. And I thought, this is really interesting, because the work, it's about that engagement that I'm having with the actors, and putting the actors into a collaborative chair. Maybe they don't get rich making these movies, but they're making something with me, and I did it 3 times now. So the third one is the one that's playing, that played yesterday. And the power of improvisation, of the magic of what, I mean, the cameras that she's filming us with, I was like that with 3 of these on me. And you use these little cameras, and no one can say, no, you can't do that. Because I think the industry's changing. The films are getting huge, and then the films are getting very small. And I think that innovation, when you're an artist, comes from doing, comes from taking risks, comes from exploring. That other that you talk about, for me, I'm not necessarily going very far from my house, but the other is well, what can we do that's different? And I mean, you walk out there, right out that door, and take a few meetings and tell them you don't have a script and no one's in it. You know, the meeting's over. So I love that. And then, you know, to be able to do that kind of filmmaking is to have a kind of power. And I think that actors need that, and directors need that.
Well, speaking about making films without a script and collaboratively with your cast and crew, I was, and knowing that all of you are very much self-starters, I think one of the aspects that seems to me from looking from New York that may be a difference between American and Canadian independent films has nothing to do with content, has nothing to do with style, but it seems to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that there's more dependency on government financing in Canada, and you may have an idea, but then you won't follow through if some government agency doesn't support you. Am I mischaracterizing you? Please.
Well, this last film, I'm a Good Person, I'm a Bad Person, does not have a cent of outside funding other than my credit cards. And in a way, I guess, I really wanted to make a film that was just an art proposition, that had no commercial agenda at all. And I felt like I could only do that if I completely invested in the film myself. Because I think that if there is financing, for me anyway, then I really feel like I need to sell the film. There's a responsibility to do that. I had Telefilm money in MODRA from the Low Budget Independent Feature Film Program. It's an amazing program, director-driven. But my goal became at TIFF to make a sale, which I did to Mongrel, and then to make an international sale. And it was really good for the film. It got it a lot of exposure. But I think that there's so many different ways to reach audiences, and some films, I mean, I don't know, but I think that what you talked about, Carl, in terms of technology, technology has informed and changed how we make films, and all these different platforms to reach our audiences has changed how we market and potentially distribute our films as well. And there's so many different ways to do it. But I guess, it's come from my parents, this kind of jumping in. I sort of feel like when I get the fire to make a film, and this one came very fast. I got the fire on March 1st. It was at TIFF Bell Lightbox, watching Canada's Top 10. I got the fire to make another feature film. And so on March 1st, I started writing, and on March 20th, we were on a plane to England and we started shooting. On the one hand, there's no money, there's no time to apply for money. And on the other hand, if you get that fire and you wait, it's like falling in love. It's like falling in love maybe is never convenient. Or I have 2 children, and it's maybe never convenient. And if you're waiting for the right time, you may never, it goes. And then that flicker of inspiration can be snuffed out so easily. And if you ignore it 1, 2, 3 times, it'll just go elsewhere. So one thing that when I get that fire and my husband goes, oh my God, not again, like take a break, I gotta listen to it. And that
carry around an extinguisher?
Yeah.
Oh no, you're on fire again. I listened to you guys, Carl and Ingrid, speak. I think it's so inspiring. I would love to have the courage to go into that mode. The thing is that take the last film. I can't rally 20 kids for 20 days plus 10 additional days with the adults. It takes place in a school. A school has to look a school, and for that you need kids and you need money. Yeah, I can't do that on my credit card, so you need a script, and then you need to write the script for about 2 years. None of my scripts have been written under 2 years and under 9.6 drafts. But I listen to you guys, and I wish I would have the courage to say, okay, that's it. I'm on fire, so if I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna make sure that the subject is appropriate to do that kind of creating for that creating process.
There are different types of projects as well. When you look at the previews and the scenes, there's different types of. I don't know. Your filmmaking is a bit kind of I don't know. They're a bit more like grand, the kind of the less intimate kind of, I think, and I think in Quebec that's the type of filmmaking that we kind of in general kind of create, I think, kind of if you look at the films that we make.
Well, just, let's talk about government money. What does government money do I mean, I think that you can say, oh, you know, government money, it's like a welfare check, and these lazy Canadians and their big tax credits and telefilm funds, that's the reason why they make such shitty movies. I've heard this before. I don't think that's true, and I don't think that's fair. I think it's jealousy. I mean, I think having federal support for filmmaking is really important. I think especially in English Canada, again, I always talk about English Canada, but, you know, we are such so not in control of our culture in English Canada. And, you know, an example, and I'm always experimenting because I just want to see. It's like my movie making is like a bunch of beakers, and I'm testing, well, what happens when I add this? So my new experiment was to take my camcordery, shitty, unlit, unscripted, terrible movie making style, and then add a famous person into the mix. And what does that do? You know what? The audience doesn't give a shit about the lighting and they don't. All they care about, they just want to touch this guy. They want to come and touch him and get a photo. And so the experiment, I mean, I don't know how it'll turn out because we're in the middle of the lab that's going on out there right now. Will having famous guy in lo-fi, no-fi movie make it a success? The answer is, yeah, I think so. Because it's pre-sold already. And you can say, oh, you know, artistically, we don't want to think about these things. I've always been at least one of the irritating producers on my movies because I can't not think about that stuff. And you know, we need this federal support. I think it's important.
We do, and I prefer to be an independent filmmaker in Canada than in the United States, for sure, because if their system is not perfect, it's certainly one of the best in the world, I think. And to be fair, yes, we have to come with a script and we have to convince people, and sometimes we don't like the people in place that are reading our scripts. Sometimes we do, but at the end of the day also, when you get the financing, when you get the money, you get a lot of latitude. I don't have any example in mind of Telefilm saying, after seeing a first draft of the editing, no, you can't do that with the film. Never, it never happened. So we do have liberty also when we get the money.
Just a quick back to my beaker for a sec. So the last movie I did last year that was here called Repeaters, totally private financing. No Telefilm, no tax credits, nothing. It was a company with money, and they paid for the movie. And, you know, it was amazing. Great. Totally different experience. But, you know, there's always strings. There's always going to be a string. It sounds like, oh, it's perfect, you know, but, you know, it's not.
Okay, well, thank you. We have about 10 minutes, and we'd like to open the panel to questions from the audience, please.
Question to Philip. What would you do if you had a larger limit credit card?
That's tough. There is a film I've written this spring on an island in Greece. It's called Mesopotamia, and the main character is called Philippe Falardeau. And then I get all excited about it, and my producers have read it, and they're all excited about it. And then I say, no. You know why? Because I can't see myself asking for public fund for making a film about me. It would not be just about me, and it would be, I think, autodérisoire, but I thought, no, it's public money, I can't do that. So if I had a large credit card, I'd probably do that Mesopotamie film. But I don't have a large credit card. Do you?
Well, you just have to start spending the credit cards, and then they give you more and more and more.
Yeah, but you're on fire, Ingrid. I'm not on fire.
I would see that film.
Yeah. Another question from the
Some of you guys were talking about sort of non-traditional ways you were going about making your films. Do you see, as far as they relate to audiences, the future of how any non-traditional ways you're hoping to get your movies sort of shown, whether it be outside of theaters or online, any kind of way?
I want a screen with 300 people in the room. I don't like the computer. I don't like small screens. So I'm old-fashioned.
This film, why do I keep saying the title? Because I really want you guys to come and see it. I've got 4 more screenings, so that's why I'm trying to. And then I'm going to say, what was the title of my film, everybody? Okay. This film was inspired by film festivals, the film festival tour I did with my daughter with Modra, and for me, I want to show it at film festivals. Interestingly, I just want it to stay in the art realm, and I want to show at as many film festivals as possible. Here in Toronto, I have 4 different screens, 5 screenings, over 1,000 people can see the film. I'm ecstatic about that. And hopefully, I'm just going to put out there, Sundance, Berlin, Cannes, just putting
I agree with Ivan. I want people to be in a room where and there's no fire exit, and they watch the film for an hour and a half. If I'm gonna make a film for an iPhone, I'm gonna frame it differently. I'm gonna do a lot of things differently, and I don't want to do that. Not at this point. Although, if we're talking about new ways of distributing the film, if someone writes me from New Zealand and says, I heard about It's Not Me, I Swear, where can I see it? Well, it's not distributed in New Zealand. Write this down. I'm going to tell him, go on a BitTorrent and download it. I don't care. I want you to see it. If it's not available in New Zealand, go for it. It's there somewhere on the web. I like that. But in the first months of the life of the film, I want the film to be seen on the big screen in a theater.
Any?
which yeah, okay, come on. Which is what is really cool with all these platforms, right? Is it used to be that you would get your festival exposure, and then a few months later there would be television, and then a few months later there would be DVD, and then 6 months later there would be the broadcast window. And what's fantastic with Modra, for example, is iTunes, Amazon, Netflix fills all the gaps. So the film is constantly accessible 24/7, and people can see it all over the world. And that, I think, is a fantastic thing for independent filmmakers, for sure, and for all filmmakers. And the landscape is changing. I mean, within a week of Modra being released on DVD, all the blockbusters closed. And so DVD's changing, broadcast is changing, but I very much agree with you that if I was going to make a film for the iPhone, my process, my intention with the first step into the making of that film would be completely different. I'm making films for a big screen, for the sort of, for that shared experience, because like Deepa started us off, the exchange, the dialogue. I started doing live commentaries with Modra. I was, if someone bought the DVD, I would go to their house and watch it with them and do a live commentary, because there's not a commentary on the DVD. And it's because I love the dialogue, That's the drug for me. I'm on fire.
It was interesting. I was had the privilege of being on a jury in Japan last August, in Nara, which is the ancient capital of Japan, and the film festival lost the only cinema in Nara about 4 months before the festival, so they had to outfit basically a community center, and I was told that there are fewer and fewer cinemas in Japan, and there are fewer and fewer places where one can buy DVDs, because everyone is just watching films on the computer, which I found very sad. And I thought maybe this explains somewhat the lack of interesting new Japanese cinema. I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen in Toronto or New York, and probably not Vancouver either. There seems to be a genuine, or Montreal, audience that wants to go to cinema.
Subject for Canadian film, the disappearance of cinema theater in Japan.
Well, people say it's the future. That's why I brought it. This is why I brought it up. Any other questions or comments? Back there, yes.
Hi, I just wanted to say I've been programmer here at TIFF for Canadian features for this. This is my second year, and so I watched a lot of films in the last 2 years, a lot of Canadian films, and I just wanted to say that I was very, very much impressed. Coming from Quebec, knowing I've been covering, I'm a journalist also, so I've been covering Quebec cinema for almost 2 decades now. And sometimes I find Quebec filmmakers to be a little bratty. And I was wondering if in English Canada, the filmmakers from Quebec had that reputation. Since I saw, what I saw in English Canada was filmmakers not even seeking public funding, just doing as Carl and Ingrid do, take the money and run, take the credit cards and make their films, and ask for favors from friends and then reimburse them with favors. And so I saw a very close-knitted community of filmmakers in English Canada, which I found, which is very, very different from Quebec. So I was wondering, I want your point of view, Ingrid and Carl, on what we are and what you are. Do you see a very big difference?
Well, I mean, I think that it's hard in English Canada. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm always applying for, $2 million from Telefilm. I'm always bugging people to make my. People always say this, but Carl, you've done so many movies. You really need to do a $10 million movie. This is your next step, Carl. And they're like, it's some revelation. Like, oh my God, I never thought of that. No, that's right. I need to make a 10 million. Great. When, right? And I think that this is the thing. People are, why are you so prolific? I don't know. If you're a chef, you cook. If you're a writer, you write. If you're a film director, you direct. What? You wait around and hope that someone's going to hire you to do an episode of some television show, which isn't the same. What these guys do, that's filmmaking. And filmmakers have to make films. And that's what that fire that she's talking about, you can say you don't have it, you have it. And I think that life is short. And there isn't enough money out in this system to support, 50 features out of Vancouver at $10 million a piece. The market doesn't want that. What's the market want? Good stories, passion and fire,
Yeah, and I would just also say, the films like Liolo and Mon Oncle Antoine and Triplets of Belleville and Crazy, like, I am so inspired by the films coming out of French Canada. And, we're in English Canada, we're always comparing the audience, the numbers. It's like in French Canada, the film did this. In English Canada, nobody came. And you have this, the star system that English Canada is always talking about, you have in French Canada. And so I think that there is, I just don't want us ever to separate, ever, because I just love, I love our country. And when I travel the world and I make films, I feel so proud to be Canadian, and part of that is being with French Canada. And then I'm always embarrassed when they start speaking their school French to me, and I could barely understand them. So, but that we're a bilingual country, and that our cinema is different, but also creates a whole. And I'm very, very proud of that. And no, I've never considered French Canadian filmmakers bratty.
What does that mean, Brad?
Like a pest.
Ah, pest.
Like a pest. Yeah. If anything, I'm a little bit envious.
Yes, totally. Totally jealous of Quebec.
I think some of the best cinema has come from filmmakers being surrounded properly. And if you look at even fringe art filmmakers like Tarkovsky, came out of heavily funded, well-surrounded environments. And I do think that in Quebec we're very, very, very well surrounded, and both from Telefilm and Sodak, and it creates schools of short filmmakers making the leap into feature filmmaking, like I just did, and I think the peace of mind for a filmmaker creates work that is not stressed. That's just, you're an artist, and filmmaking is a very expensive art form. And we're very well surrounded. And if you want to, I don't know, there's different ways of seeing it, but I don't think that we're bratty.
Very quickly, when I speak about my work, I have to speak about my relationship with my producer. I've grown with him and her. We have 2 producers in the past 10 years, and this is exactly what you said. I'm not stressed by the whole process of raising the money. I am when we talk about it, But I have my bubble, and they have theirs, and we grow together, and that's a stable relationship. And it's comforting to know that when you put aside 1 year to write the film, that there's probably going to be something that's going to happen in 2 years later. And when I listen to you guys, I picture you're the whole crew. You're the producer. You're the director. You're the scriptwriter. You're everything. And for me, I listen to you and I get anguish.
Well, I've gotten the high sign, but I do want to thank Telefilm for putting together this great panel and for inviting me to moderate it. So, and also thank you, Carl, Philippe, Ivan, and Ingrid. Thank you.